Good morning. How's everyone doing? Good. So just a quick word on the food thing. So it's going to seem like a lot, but where it comes from is Sergey Brin, one of our founders, once said, nobody should ever be more than 200 feet away from food. And so you'll see it's a big part of kind of how we think and feel. What's that? Was it 100 feet? I've been corrected, 100 feet. Even I learn things at these events. For those of you who are from Google, I just want to say I'm Laszlo Bock. You've never seen me in anything other than a t-shirt, but this is what I look like when I dress like a grown-up. So welcome to all of you. I couldn't be more delighted to welcome you to Google to this first event of our kind. The list of people, as you've no doubt noticed this morning in bumping into one another, is just amazing. And I'm incredibly grateful that all of you took the time to travel, to get out here, and to spend so much of your time with us and kind of take this risk and see what happens. Every one of you is here because we believe you will add something to this conversation we're having. We have Pulitzer Prize winning writers. We have pioneers in everything from crowdsourcing and crowdfunding to how to make the best coffee on the planet in a sustainable, thoughtful way. We have the world's experts on things like happiness, how to make teams actually work well, topics like inclusion. You represent together 63 companies and almost 3 million employees. So what you do in terms of management and how you think about work and people makes a tremendous difference in the world. We have Bank of America, Teach for America, and we even have Virgin America. So something for everybody. And then we've got some folks for Google too. We will probably edit this before we put it on the website. So why are we here? We had this epiphany a while back that you actually spend more time working than you do doing anything else in life. I mean, if you add up the hours, particularly now that we've all got devices and we're connected all the time, you spend more time working than you do sleeping. You spend more time working than you do on your favorite hobbies and favorite activities. And the crazy thing is you spend more time working than you do with the people most important to you in the world. Your spouses, your family, your parents, your best friends. You spend more time with these people you work with. And it's kind of crazy. It's crazy that for most people in the world, work is not better than it is. And there's this great movie, Office Space, which everyone's seen. There's this beautiful, beautiful clip where Peter Gibbons, the main character, is in group therapy to kind of figure out like what's going on with his work that I just want to share because I think it beautifully encapsulates how so many people feel. So if you could play the video.
So I was sitting in my cubicle today and I realized ever since I started working, every single day of my life has been worse than the day before it. So that means that every single day that you see me, that's on the worst day of my life.
What about today? Is today the worst day of your life?
Yeah.
Wow, that's messed up.
Like that. That is messed up. And that's like the worst psychologist in the world. Like that is like the least possible helpful thing you could do. But I think a lot of people feel that way. You know, you don't have to read too much in the newspaper to see stories about people who don't earn a living wage, about companies that have full-time employees but that don't offer health care, about employees who are locked in their warehouses by their employers, right, and not allowed to leave, and there's oppressive heat, oppressive conditions happening even in a place as presumably sophisticated as the United States. And you all remember years ago about a company where there were suicides because of the work conditions, and people were killing themselves by jumping off buildings. And the solution the company implemented was not, well, we should do counseling, maybe we should look at our working conditions. They installed suicide nets off the second floor to catch the people as they jumped, right? And as I've read the press and thought about and thought of what so many of you have done at your companies and what we've tried to do here, it all kind of came to a head when I got a call from a reporter from CNN International. And she asked me, she said, this was a few years ago, and she said, Google is this great workplace, and it sounds so amazing, and surely that must be destiny. I mean, surely you have figured something out, and every company will eventually treat workers the way you do. And I started to say, well, yeah, that's what I believe. But then I realized that I was wrong and she was wrong. Because ultimately, you can make a ton of money by treating people miserably, right? And this goes back to the 1920s and Taylorism and things like this. But you can treat people really badly, and there's enough people who are desperate for work that you can just grind through them and cycle through them and have a miserable experience. And when they're no longer productive, you fire them, you lay them off, you whatever. And sometimes you have to make tough business decisions. But the way you treat people is a choice. And you can make a tremendous amount of money by treating people miserably. And I believe, and we at Google believe, you can also actually run a great business by treating people exceptionally well. I like to talk about low freedom and high freedom environments. And low freedom environments are ones where you're told what to do, you have very little discretion, you don't enjoy it, you don't appreciate it, and work sucks. And you go to work every day because you need to make rent, or you need to pay for your kids to go to school, or you need to put food on the table, but it's a means to an end. And we believe it could be something a lot more. And that over time, the most talented people on the planet will actually gravitate towards high freedom environments, like many of your companies. And over time, that will be an advantage. But in the meantime, you can get rich treating people pretty badly. So that's kind of my starting worldview and how we think about it at Google, and it's a choice you get to make. So on the Google side, what do we do about it? And if you'll indulge me, I'll share a little bit about our approach before we open it up for the rest of the day. So Google offices, and I think we'll have tours later in the day for anybody who wants to sort of explore and see what Googlers look like in situ. But they're pretty nice, and most people look at Google and they'll say, well, you guys are successful on the people side for two reasons. One is you give people free food. You have beanbags, you have lava lamps, you have nice furniture, you have these beautiful, well-lit spaces. You do all this stuff for people, and that's why your company works. That's the draw. And the other thing people will often say is they will say, well, of course Google can do it. You guys have huge margins. You guys make a fortune. You print money. Of course you can afford to do all these things for people. And both of those arguments miss the point and are wrong. So I want to kind of go back to kind of where Google started. This one's a little grainy because there wasn't a lot of digital photography in 1999. So this is a photo of, can anyone name the company? It's kind of a gimme. Google, yes. Thank you. Very good, very nice. So this was our office in 1999. This was the HR department in 1999. You can see it's not opulent, sawhorses, high panels, all kinds of things. But there's a funny thing going on. There's that yellow balloon floating in the corner. Because what we started doing from the very beginning, and this predates me, I didn't join until 2006. What Larry and Sergey started doing, and what was important, was to celebrate small things. So when you join the company, there's a balloon on your desk. It says welcome, right? And we still do that for every new employee, and there's all kinds of things to celebrate that moment and welcome them. A balloon costs nothing, but it's something we did when we had zero revenue, no money, working conditions that look like any other company on the planet, and we did it because we think there's a different way you should be treating people. Because what it fundamentally comes down to is if you want to get the best out of people, and if you want to do the right thing, you sort of have to start from the question of, are people good or are people evil? Because if you believe people are good, you treat them a certain way. You give them freedom, you share information with them, you help them make decisions about how the company goes, because they're good people. They'll do the right thing, right? If you don't believe they're good, you control them, you manage them super tightly, you watch over them and spy on them and try to find out what's happening, and you design your company with the expectation that your employees will try to cheat and steal and do bad things for their own personal enrichment, right? Which is what a lot of companies end up doing. So how does this stuff work? Well, there's one other slide I want to show you. This is something called a Polaroid picture. We didn't crop it. This is actually, some of you will remember this. That's Omid Kordestani. Omid was our first head of sales. He was employee number 10 or 11. He took the company from 0 in revenue to $20 billion in revenue. And then he stepped out of the job. And now he's back actually helping us and figuring out how we're going to go from 50 billion to whatever the number is, to infinity. But what's interesting is, again, very small. The conditions are not amazing, right? You can see like this little projector here sitting on a cardboard box. I think he's probably standing literally on a couple sandbags, because what would happen is once we started having revenue, we'd have a projection. He'd always beat it, and he got a reputation for sandbagging. So He was forced to give talks standing on a sandbag. But he was doing something that started very early in the company's days, which is standing up in front of all the employees and sharing our financial data. And since the beginning, and what it eventually evolved into is this thing called TGIF, where every week, Larry and Sergey, our founders and our CEO, stand up in front of the whole company. You can ask them anything, literally any question you want. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But again, this costs nothing, right? It's a choice we made. And there was a possibility that any of these people was going to go to Yahoo or AltaVista or Lycos or InfoSeek, remember all these companies, and say, here's what Google is doing. Or, you know what, I know Google's secrets. If you hire me, I will tell you those secrets. No one did, because people are fundamentally good. And if you treat them like that, they will live up to your expectations. So the core of Google's success and what we think about people doesn't have anything to do with the food. It doesn't have anything to do with that. The food really is just to lure people like you in to conferences like this. It comes down to three things that really drive our culture. One is a mission that matters. You heard Iveta start off with our mission already. If you went to any person who works at this company and said, what is Google's mission? They would dutifully recite it, right? Organize the world's information, et cetera, et cetera. What's weird is we don't tell anyone the mission. We never talked about it internally. It's not in training materials. It's not, in new hire orientation. But it's out there in the world because it was in our IPO letter. Our founders put it out there. And people come to the company because they're attracted to something that is more meaningful than just selling ads or doing search or doing YouTube or doing people operations. They want to be part of something bigger. Adam Grant, who's here today, who you'll hear from later, has done amazing research about how giving somebody a connection to something meaningful has dramatic impact on their actual productivity, and we see the same thing. But what we found is a mission that matters both attracts the right people, so there's a selection effect, and it keeps them driven and motivated, particularly on the days when you're frustrated and unhappy because you feel connected to something bigger. The second thing is transparency. So I touched on TGIF. So you can ask the founders anything, right? And it ranges from, why is my chair so uncomfortable, which people have asked, to, was Google's decision in regards to China good or was it evil? And when we decided to stop hosting search in China because of our views on censorship, was that the right thing to do or the wrong thing? And what's amazing is reasonable people can disagree, right? There's different perspectives on it. You could argue greater good for the greatest number, or you could argue that, well, we want to be absolute purists. And we had a debate and discussion and conversation. Every quarter, Eric Schmidt, who was our CEO for a decade and is now our executive chairman, gets up on stage and shares the board of directors presentation with the entire company. All the detail about what's going on in the company, our most sensitive information shared with the board only, he shares it with everybody because if you believe people are good, you will of course expect them to respect confidentiality and you're transparent with them. And then we give employees voice. This is the third very, very key thing. It's critical at Google that not just you let people know what's going on, but if you then don't let them impact what's happening, they'll realize it's just a sham. So for example, in my own world, we redesigned how we pay people. We changed all our bonus curves and who gets big bonuses and small. The way we did it was we took an anonymized set of data and we gave it to a bunch of employees and said, why don't you monkey with this and come up with something that is fair and makes sense? And again, that's madness in a lot of places, but we felt they should be involved in shaping these most critical things that affect them. So the other thing that's interesting is, so this is how we sort of run the company and think about the culture and bring people out. We also take a different perspective on how we think about people operations. What in a lot of places is HR. We generate a lot of memes inside the company, and this is Success Kid. We did not create Success Kid, but somebody put this label on it, science-based HR, and it came out when we rolled out this piece of work called Project Oxygen, which talked about what makes people successful managers at Google. And there wasn't a lot of rocket science to the findings, right? Have regular one-on-ones, be predictable, be a good coach, give clear guidance, right? Not mind-blowing stuff. But what was transformative was we did the research and analysis here on Googlers on the very specific context of how things work here. And we did it using robust academic quality analytics coming out of our People Innovation Lab. And the effect was Googlers, who are engineers, said, this passes my test. It's not just you making stuff up, right? You have proven this works at Google. And then every 6 months, we survey people, managers, direct reports, do a survey on their managers, provide anonymous feedback, and we get sort of a manager quality rating every 6 months. As a result of this work, managers have gotten better every 6 months at Google for the last 3.5 years, just by getting the information out there and rooting it in what we do. So we've done other things. We use nudge emails. There's some folks here from the UK nudge unit. Inspired by that, we use nudge emails to get people to contribute more to their 401ks. It cost us $28 million, which on the one hand, that's a lot of money. But on the other hand, when you compound that out, it's $200 million or more in retirement savings for Googlers as a result of investing when you're 30 or 35 or 40 versus not investing at all and continuing it over your career, right? Huge, huge return on investment and great for the people and the right thing to do. So we try to apply data to just about everything we do to make sure we know it's true. Because too much of our field is, well, here's what I think, here's what I've done before, here's what's best practice. And the problem with that is best practice varies a lot based on the specific context of where you work. And your ability to communicate it to people in your organization, have them believe it, is dependent heavily on whether the analysis, the research really is about your organization. And I know we're not alone in this. I was lucky enough to bump into Jen Mann earlier, but I'd wanted to call her out earlier. She runs HR for SAS. She's been there 16 years. SAS is an enterprise software company in North Carolina, right? I always get the Carolinas mixed up. Sorry. But North Carolina. And SAS was the model for a lot of what we did. I mean, if you look them up, they have this beautiful bucolic campus. They provide great wellness programs for their employees. They pay them well. When the economy took a downturn, their founder wrote about how, he went to employees and said, times are tough. What should we do? And people voluntarily took pay cuts rather than have layoffs. And it's mind-blowing. It's because people are good and will do the right thing if you make them part of how you manage a company. And so part of today is drawing inspiration for us from all of you. But another part is, at Google, we have about 50,000 people. And as I mentioned, all of us together employ about 3 million people, but there's 4.2 billion people working on the planet. And the question to kind of kick off the day would be, how different would the world be if every single one of those people had meaning in their work and felt like they were doing something that mattered rather than just trying to make ends meet? And I think all these organizations that are here, the academics we have, the thought leaders we have, the economists we have, I think we have a chance to kind of get the word out and have people think about this stuff. Because we spend so much time on work that all of us individually in our lives, it's kind of the most important thing. If you can change that, if you can improve that, the world will be a different place. And I think in some ways, it's solvable for the first time in human history, right? If you look at the spread of mobile technology, right, you're able to communicate a lot more, and there's all kinds of interesting anecdotes about river fishermen in Indonesia being able to use cell phones to check what fish prices are up and down the river before they come back into port, and earning an average of 30% more than they did before the advent of phones, right? It is mind-blowing, and because we can communicate all this, the examples that all of you set in your research and in your practice and in your discussions and as public figures has an opportunity to have a disproportionate impact. And I think what folks outside our organizations don't appreciate is it's not just 1 or 2 companies doing this, right? We'll hear from Wegmans later today. Jack DePeters is here. Wegmans was the best company to work for in America, right? Before Google was. And not that it's a competition, but what I mean is, this is a company that's very different, and they figured it out in a completely different industry. And I can't wait to interview him and hear what he has to say. And it's not fair that Google gets press because journalists like writing about the tech industry, and people think watches are cool and so on, right? So there's a huge opportunity to say more and do more, and that's why we're here today. To hear from some of the best thinkers in the world, to compare notes, and perhaps to quietly conspire to make work better everywhere. So thank you all for coming and for being part of this today. Now, what I'd like to do now, we're going to shift today's schedule. There's a couple small changes. Everyone who's supposed to be here is still here, but we're shuffling things around a little bit. So I'd like to welcome Marina Gorbis to the stage in just a moment. Marina leads the Institute for the Future, which is a think tank in the area, and she's one of the most thoughtful people about how work happens today, how it's happened in the past, and how it is likely to happen 10 and 20 and 30 and 50 and 100 years from now. She's charming and thoughtful and brilliant, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say, Marina. Thank you so much for joining us.